I think it's all about reframing it and let them see like this game, the purpose of it is just to engage your audience. That's really what we're trying to do, is bring them back into the meeting, because people are going to check out on their own ways. People are going to take out their phones. They're going to take out their laptops and they're not going to pay attention. But if I create an engagement activity, their focus is still on the stage and still in that meeting.
Welcome to No More Bad Events, a fun and insightful podcast for professional event organizers and for anyone at any level interested in producing nothing but the best events. Each week, we'll talk with legendary event professionals to get an inside look into what they think makes a great event. And in the process, we'll draw out insider secrets, non-traditional approaches, and compelling stories from the most captivating personalities in the business. No More Bad Events is produced and presented by eSpeakers, the most trusted online platform for the best keynote speakers in the world. And I'm your host, Scott Bloom, comedian, event MC, and now your podcast host. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for dropping by. You know, one of the really cool things about this podcast is I get to meet a lot of interesting people. I've met so many people in the events industry doing this podcast, and that's led me to meet other people. This gentleman I haven't worked with, but I've known him for years now. He does a lot of different things. We're going to focus on one area on this episode, but he's an international keynote speaker. He's a professional MC. He's a DJ. And he also knows a lot about gamification. And in today's episode, we cover that topic. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and the one that we haven't yet really covered. Nor is it one that we hear a lot about, but it is truly a winner in the world of event engagement. And gamification, for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, is simply a process of adding games or game-like elements to an event to encourage participation. It's a great technique for engagement, and both Rob and I talk about how more and more companies are coming to that same conclusion. Rob is truly a master of gamification, engagement, and entertainment, not to mention a great person to interview on this subject and a brilliant storyteller. He's definitely shaking up the corporate event scene one game show at a time. In our conversation, we look at Rob's journey from theme park DJ to creating the best game show ever. And now he's crafted a variety of interactive audience-engaging games for events of all kinds. From clever icebreakers to full-fledged game shows, Rob talks about ways to incorporate prizes, technology, and something I consider a must at events, laughter. He also shares behind-the-scenes anecdotes and the secrets to keeping an audience hooked with bite-sized entertainment. On top of all that, Rob advises on using digital tools like Mentimeter and crowd control games, which you can play on your mobile phone for unforgettable experiences to build community, whether it's in person or virtual. So listen in as we level up the event game with the power of play with my good friend, fellow MC, and the master of the gamification universe, Rob Ferre. One of the first things I ever did, I think the first corporate event I did was a game show. They needed someone who was quick on their feet, someone who could be able to banter, improvise. So they figured we'll get a comedian. Yes. I got paid $600. So I started designing and hosting game shows. You do a lot of that too. So tell me, how did you get into the whole game show field and designing and hosting games?
I actually started working in theme parks as a DJ and interactive host. And so I wasn't just playing music, I would interact and engage the people at the parks. And so one of my jobs was at Universal Studios, where I would play a game show and people would come and get beats and party and dance with me. And then I would create this big old dance party, and then a band would go on, and then I'd keep the vibes going. But it wasn't like a traditional game show where like, I need volunteers. I would just play Name That TV theme song. But I also worked as a game show host at the Nickelodeon Hotel, which was a more of a traditional game show atmosphere. Everybody should know one of the best game shows ever invented for kids was Double Dare. So we did a Double Dare type show where we'd slime people, we'd do trivia and physical challenges. And that's where I really cut my chops as a game show host. Then I moved back to Utah, started a DJ business, and then I would go to DJ conferences. And there was this other DJ who taught gamification and game show stuff. And his name was Scott Favor. And I was immediately drawn to him. And so I would go to his sessions. I would learn from him. And then about 10 years ago, I wrote something down and said, I want to create my own game show called The Best Game Show Ever. So I started developing it, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's a game show variety show. And so I really lean into that. And what I love to do is I love to involve gamification and a lot of these mini games into what I do as an MC.
So it might be obvious what gamification is, but it's been a big buzzword lately. It's everything from a contest that's going throughout a conference. Maybe there's a sales group, you want to incentivize them, motivate them, and everyone wants to be competitive. And then there is actually, half-hour breakouts or an hour somewhere in the general session to do a game show. How would you define gamification, and what does it entail as far as when they call Rob Ferre, hey, we want to bring you in? What are they asking from you? Are you offering that, or they're saying, hey, I know you're really big with games. What can you offer us?
Well, I look at gamification as a big, huge, overarching theme for anything. You can use gamification anywhere. It's basically creating competition and incentivization, if anything. I know a company that does gamification with companies where they have a software where when you complete a task or you send a compliment or you do a thing within that organization, they get points that goes towards incentives. Those incentives are bucks that goes towards maybe their company store, things of that nature. Gamification is also within Delta, for example. I'm a big Delta guy. I like to get my Delta points. And I look at it as gamification. How can I get more points to get to the next level? It's just leveling up. So with that being said, gamification is everywhere. Within what I do, the context of meetings and also events, I like to find ways where I can bring people to the stage or find a way to engage the audience where they can compete and have the possibility of winning something. And sometimes all people want to win is that opportunity to say, I won. And so I can look at a lot of different things. Often speakers will consult with me and I will take their presentations and create gamification. And I often put gamification into two different buckets. One is all play and one is team play. And then you also have individual play. So when it comes to individual play, you'll think of games like Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune. They're by themselves. When you think of team play, you think of Survivor, correct? You have two different teams, tribes that are competing against each other. And then maybe in all play, anybody can get on that stage. So for example, Price is Right. Everybody's a potential contestant. And then they can all play together. And then if they get the right answers, they can eventually work themselves onto the stage. Or let's make a deal. And so I like to involve those different aspects. And I talk to the people that I'm working with. Would you like to engage the entire audience? Do you want to bring people up to the stage? So those are different ways to engage people with gamification. And the most important thing about gamification is asking the question, why? Why do we want to do this? Because people are like, oh yeah, we want to do this. Like, well, why? I always have to lead with curiosity so I can understand what they really want from this. So for example, tomorrow I'm doing a game show and I asked them, why are we doing this? Oh, just for fun. Okay, great. They just want to do it for fun. We want to create some engagement. We have very competitive people. That's a great reason. Some people ask me, we want to actually test them on their knowledge of our company or some of the things that we taught them. Cool. Let's take some of that methodology or some of the things that you're teaching and put it into the game. So there's so many different ways to apply gamification at an event.
Yeah, when I was first designing games, I was referring to them as knowledge competitions.
See, this is so good. I love how you say that.
Yeah, I mean, what I was trying to do was give them a reason. I mean, they were bringing me in that, but it was to reinforce the information they already learned. So the questions were based on the learning, which I think is a great way to do. But what I've discovered over the last 3-4 years, that games are a great way to get everyone involved, get them out of their comfort zone, get them alive. It's very, very powerful. And as a comedic host, I'm using games now as a way to have a format, a through line, so that I can add some comedy while I'm doing it, some banter, some witty humor, but also to get people cheering, get them yelling, get them involved. I think there are a lot of people, a lot of event professionals out there who don't really see this as an option. And I think it should be at every event to some extent, whether you want to reinforce information or get your teams involved. What do you say to someone who gives you a little pushback? That's kind of cheesy. We don't want to do games.
Aha, I'm glad you asked. So you said knowledge competition. It's all about reframing it. So some people say, well, we don't like games. We don't like a cheesy game show host. Oh, no, that's great. That's fine. You know what I do? I actually do what is called engagement activities. You want your people to be engaged with what's going on stage. You want them to be in their seats. You want them to learn. Is that correct? Yeah. We want all those things. What are the outcomes? And I think that's really important, is to ask these people, well, what are the outcomes? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to take away? And also, do you want them to return to your event next year? Yeah, we want all that. Great, great. Let's create some engagement activities where we can get their attention at the top of the hour. I usually like to do engagement activities coming in after a break, because people are talking, they're chatting. How do we get them engaged again? Or, hey, we have two really heavy speakers and we have like a 3-hour block and there's not a lot of time in between. We have about 15 minutes. What can we do? Let's do an engagement activity. I'm like, ooh, because sometimes people go immediately like, oh, game show. Oh, I don't want to go on stage, or I don't want to be embarrassed, because sometimes they go to certain game shows and they think about that. When I think of knowledge competition, like you just said, I love that idea. I think of...
Please take it. Please take it when you need to reframe things. That's fine.
Yeah. And you can take mine as well. I think it's all about reframing it and let them see, like, this game, the purpose of it is just to engage your audience. That's really what we're trying to do, is bring them back into the meeting, because people are going to check out on their own ways. People are going to take out their phones. They're going to take out their laptops and they're not going to pay attention. But if I create an engagement activity, their focus is still on the stage and still in that meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think engagement is such a big word these days. And it's what we need, because people have short attention spans and they are going to go to their phone. So any way you can grab their attention, bring their attention back up on stage. So you mentioned that you have games that, happen on stage. There's probably games that you have with the audience. Why don't you tell us about a couple of the games? I know you've created a lot of original games. Why don't you tell us a little bit about a couple of those?
Well, I'm actually going to start with one game that's not an original game, but it's one of my new favorites. And it's from a platform called Crowd Control Games. And it's called Majority Rules. One of my favorites. And what I love about this game, there's a prompt on the screen and everybody logs in on their phone. We give them a code. They log in. Then they have two choices. What do you think is healthier? Tater tots or French fries, right? You give them two choices. And then I bring two people onto the stage. With this one, I usually like to bring up maybe management, a CEO, and they have to predict what the audience is going to vote for. And then they get points based on that. It's a match game of sorts, but it's engaging the entire audience. It's one of my new favorite games, where we can just involve people in their seats from the back of the room to the people on stage. Because sometimes that is a challenge when you're only featuring a couple of people and people now all have a stake in the game. One of my signature games is Name That TV Theme Song. It's fairly simple. I just go out into the audience. They raise their hand. I've seen this show. I know this song. I give them a prize. And it's a fairly simple game. And that was the game I started out with when I was working at Universal Studios.
So tell me the difference between working with, let's say, some interactive games that are just an interstitial 5-7 minute thing to maybe more of these 45-minute, hour-long games. I know you've incorporated a lot of technology, a lot of software. Tell me about some of the games where you're incorporating something up on the screen, whether it's a licensed game, lockout buzzers. What does that entail?
Yeah, so when I do my game shows, it's usually an hour, and I put 3 games within that hour. I'm starting to find more and more that you can't do an hour-long game show with just one game. People lose their interest. The gimmick is lost on them. They're like, okay, we've seen this. So I think the sweet spot for a game is about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. If you're just going to do one game, I often suggest that. So let's give an example of something of a traditional nature, like Jeopardy. I have a version of it called Quiz Show, which we actually have lockout buzzers. We also have it so you can play on your phones and you can chime in on your phones. I do this virtually as well. And what I love about this game, people know Jeopardy. It's still one of the most popular games out there. And it tests your knowledge and it gives people the opportunity to chime in and use their gravitas. What is Scott Bloom, right? People love being able to do that. So that's one of my favorite games. So lots of traditional games. Another fun one that everybody knows is Family Feud. And that has been stayed relevant because of people like Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey makes it great because the way he interacts with the contestant, the way he says the games. And one of the things that I love to do is to send an internal survey that we can do with that organization. And we can use those answers within the Family Feud construct.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, that's the way it has to be almost done, because otherwise it just sounds like fluff. But what a great way to get some feedback from the audience, let them know it's about them. And in that situation, it's really about the people up on stage. Do you have any elements to then draw the audience just so that they're not just viewers? Is there a way in a game like that to make them active participants as well?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways. One of my favorite ways is to have them put a stake in the game. They have a stake in the game in the sense of, let's say we're at a meeting and we're sitting at rounds. Rounds are my favorite type of seating when it comes to games because they can then select somebody to represent their table. Now they have somebody who's representing their table who's going to win money or a prize for their entire table. I usually like to do that. On the count of 3, you're going to point to the one person at your table who can do X, Y, or Z, who's really good at the gift of gab, or who's a really great dancer, or knows the most about our company. 1, 2, 3, point. This person is going to represent your table. Now, for those of you who are standing, you have the option to send somebody else on your behalf if you don't feel comfortable. Because I always like willing participants. But this way, our peers are now selecting somebody, and now they have a champion on stage that they're like, I'm rooting for this person to win the game. So that's one way I do it. Another way I do it is through some of these games that have software or a browser-based system where they can play on their phones, and then they can be a part of it. And the most simple way is dividing the audience, round of applause, cheer, having them be a part of it by engaging them by voting. The audience is the judge. Okay. And I do this with improv games. I don't know if you ever did improv, but improv games are really easy to do. Okay, this person's going to step up and give their best dad joke. Okay, audience, what do you think? And then you just put your hand over their head and they applaud and cheer and you let them pick. Games don't have to be super complicated. They don't have to have software. They don't have to have all the buzzers and bells. It can be a simple game where you bring a couple of people up and they come on stage and they just play a simple game. And one of my favorite games is just an either or game. You give everybody a choice. Was it this or that? Either or. Is this cat going to fail it or nail it? That's another game I play.
Oh, you know what? That's so funny because I was working on a game called Fail It or Nail It. And I was going to grab clips off of YouTube. And are they going to make the jump or not make the jump? So do you use videos with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so why videos work so well? Let's say we're coming in from break and everybody's chatting and talking and they're not really paying attention. And they're like, oh, it's just our host again talking on stage. And then they see a video. And they're like, I got to watch this. With that visual element, it's a pattern disrupt. And so that's why I like to do it with videos. So I have one with cats, but like, I love the idea, like, is this person going to hit the nail or are they going to fall off that ladder? Hopefully you don't have ones that are like disastrous like that, but fairly simple videos, and people love cats and it's hilarious. And so because of that video, they're about to jump and it pauses. Do they land the jump or do they fail? So it's nail it or fail it. And it's a fairly simple game, but video draws people in every time.
So I'm also like you, I'm always trying to find new games. Where do you draw your inspiration for new games? I mean, we can always do a variation of something that's on TV. I know you do like Minute to Win It. That's a great physical game. Where do you draw your inspiration?
Well, there's a lot of game shows that you can just look up on YouTube. Ellen's Game of Games. She did stuff like that, Minute to Win It. Actually, one of my favorite places to get ideas for is actually Jimmy Fallon. He does wonderful games. And he just did this game the other day. I was like, oh, I want to adapt this game. They put on 5 trucker hats on the 3 of them. And they put these trucker hats on them. And on the top, it had a celebrity. And so it was basically Jimmy Fallon didn't know what name was written on his hat, and they're trying to explain the person like taboo style without saying their name. It's the guy that's in this movie with that person, and he lands on the moon. Oh yeah, that person. And then they take it off, and then they take off the hat, and they had to get through everybody with under a minute. I also like to time things. Like the whole stakes of it is just to get it under a minute or do it within a minute or two. Because when you put a timer on something, it tightens up the game a whole lot. So let's say you are doing Family Feud. You're like, okay, this is our fast food round. We got to get done in 20 minutes. We got to get through 3 rounds in 20 minutes. Go, go, go. So they're not hamming and hawing. And now you're tightening up the game a lot. But the best way for me to actually develop new games is out of necessity. I'm working with a group, and I want to create something that is relevant to their industry. So I've created games for automotive industry. For example, is this a real car or a fake car? So I put up a name of a really weird car name. I've done this for DJ conferences. Is this a real DJ or a fake DJ?
That's hilarious.
For example, I Googled terrible DJ names, and I got a whole list of them. So one of them was Osama Bin Laden. I was like, is this real or fake? And it was real. And so I just found these terrible names. I did something like this. I don't know if I've told you this. I've done a game for speakers, and I said, is this a real author, or is this a real book, or is this?
Oh yeah, you told me about that. Yeah.
And the game is called Reddit or Shred It. If this is a real book, we're all going to say Reddit. If it's a fake book, shred it. And so I start going through these terrible titles, and some of them I make up. And one is like how to increase your IQ by eating children. And that is a real book. And then I end the game with your book, which is.
Oh, I mean, you can judge a book by its cover?
That is correct. You win all the points right now. So yes, you can judge a book by its cover. So I put that title up, and I was like, yeah, actually, this is a real book by my friend, Scott Bloom. And so I use that as an example. If you want to give away something that is on your platform, let's say you are an author, I use that as an example of a way to give away your stuff. So prizes can be fairly simple. They can be the giveaways. It could be your book. It could be swag. It could be something that everybody gets. And you can always do the Oprah thing. Well, all our contestants on this stage get this. And congratulations. Look under your chairs. You all get it as well. Yay. Everybody gets a book. So you can have a lot of fun with that. But I believe necessity for me has been the mother of invention. I've created some great games based on the theme of the event.
And you know what I always like to tell event planners when I'm working with them, that this game show is going to exceed your expectations. I think they just don't realize, I've been doing it for years, and the audience always gets involved. Some of the people, maybe if their personality is a little introverted, they're like, I would never get on stage. Sometimes when I'm asking for volunteers, I'll say, look, I know this is a scary thing, but this is a time where you can actually make a choice to do something different, have that experience to go, hey, I normally see people going up there, but this time I'm going to go up there. How do you, when you try to get volunteers on stage, if you get a little resistance, what are some of your fallbacks to get people to come up? Do you ever have to come out in the audience, or, you seem to get the amount of people you need?
So a couple of different ways. One, the pointing, having everybody else point to the person. If you know somebody in this audience who is this, boom.
Which creates a funny moment right there as well, right? What are you pointing at me for?
Right. I also like to do icebreaker games. With icebreaker games, that's when I go out into the audience, and then I kind of organically start to find my contestants. And I could play a game before the game to get my contestants. I was like, you know what? You're actually going to be coming up on stage with me in just a moment. Cool. Boom, boom, boom. So I might be vetting actual contestants. That's what they do with The Price is Right. You actually go through a vetting process, and then they pick their contestants based on the pre-interview. So you could do something similar to that. And another way, one of the easiest ways, is to talk to the organizer. I need 3 ringers. I need 3 people who will come up onto the stage. And they usually give me 5 names if I need 3. That way, just in case that person doesn't want to come up, they're in the bathroom. Actually, they didn't make it to the event. So that's some of the easiest ways to go about it. And last but not least, incentivization. Anybody out there who wants to win $100? I do.
Oh, that's going to get them up.
Hands up. Right. Keep your hands up. Or if you want to win $100, go ahead and stand up. For the rest of you, you can stay seated. We're going to find out our next 3 contestants here by playing a simple game. It's called heads or tails, and you do heads or tails until you get those people, and then they come up onto the stage. So that's another way as well. Incentivization always works.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I love, I always say there has to be some sort of prize, whether it's a Starbucks gift card, or as you said, sometimes I would do just pick me up like 5 or 6 cheesy gift shop items. We're in Vegas. Give me, a back scratcher and a deck of cards and a snow globe. Yeah. I mean, you probably have done this too, but I do it within the game. I'll pull out a prize. You can have this prize or what's inside the bag. And I always love this as a great go-to joke is I'll pull out something crappy like a little furry animal thing that no one really wants, or it's a little oven mitt. Like and they'll say, I'll take what's in the bag, and then I'll reach in and then pull out the same item, go, it looks like we have a dozen of these. I just have to get rid of them. So that's a funny. I also have done little let's make a deal type things, in the audience. That's always a fun thing. Does anyone have some item that has the company logo on it? Once again, customization really takes these games over the top. So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned with the auto industry, you're trying to do things that incorporate that industry, but I'm sure you're also trying to incorporate stuff about the company in a lot of these events. And that I think helps the organizer go, oh, this is not some random game you bring in. It's really about us. So how are ways that you make the people in the audience feel special? Hey, you created a game just for them. And I know that's your specialty.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. I usually try and get permission as well if I'm going to feature somebody. And so, for example, I have a game that I made up. It's called Hair There, where I show celebrity hairdos. And then I start showing hairdos of people within the organization that are in higher management that everybody knows. And so wait a second, boy. We recognize that. Who's that? That's Scott, everybody.
So what do you do? Blank out their face?
I blank out their face, or I just have their hairline showing. Sometimes I put a smiley face over it, or sometimes I just crop it out the rest of their face, and then I do a reveal. And it's a fairly simple way of featuring some of the people within the organization. The auto one, it was more of a theme. But when I am doing stuff that's very specific to the company, we work together and create trivia. And so that works really well in a trivia format where I use what is called, I use a variety of ones. There's Mentimeter that I use. I know some people use Kahoot. I use one that's called CrowdPurr. And I take those questions and I put them into a trivia format, and then they answer on their phones. And everybody usually has phones these days, so it's one of the easier ways to go about it. And so I did an event here in Utah where the company gave me all the questions, and they were qualifiers to be on the main stage for our final game. And so I would do that with the audience. We would do a qualifying game and then bring them onto the stage.
I love that. Have you ever had an experience where something went, I don't want to say wrong, but unexpected? Do you have any funny moments where, something happened and it wasn't the way you planned?
Well, things always can go wrong when it comes to technology. I think it's always good to have a backup if the audio isn't working and the video's not working. But one of my favorite moments is I do Name That TV theme song. And one of my favorite TV theme songs is actually Baywatch. And within TV theme songs, I actually create a challenge. And I said, you could get an upgraded prize if you run in slow motion like David Hasselhoff. That's the question.
That's great.
Cool. You can win this prize, or you could win this $20 bill, right? Whatever it may be, and run like David Hasselhoff. So I'm doing this game show. This is in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And the gentleman who guessed, he was ready for that challenge. He immediately takes his shirt off and starts running to me like in slow motion. He was a large gentleman. And then he proceeds to sling me over his shoulder and swings me around for a couple of seconds. And it
Hilarious.
Was wild. Everybody went crazy. And I later found out that he was actually not an attendee of the event. He was a vendor. So it was so funny. And everybody just had a great laugh. And so that's one of the moments I appreciate the most. I'll tell you this, when it comes to game shows as well, sometimes I over prepare and I have too much material. I think less is more. There have been times where I'm just on a groove and I just keep going and we're having so much fun, but I don't realize I've gone overtime, or they're about to bring out the second course, or we need to start the award show. So I think it's really important if you think this game's going to go 15 minutes, crowd interaction, engagement is usually going to add about 5 minutes to your game, where you bring contestants up, you interact with them, you banter with them, you have some laughs. And that's what great hosts do. They improvise and they acknowledge the moments that just happen, right? Okay, what just happened? This guy just threw me on his shoulder. What happened? We're all laughing together instead of moving through it. And I think it's always good to acknowledge some of the elephants in the room when those things happen. But if you have a 20-minute slot, plan a game that maybe takes 15 minutes.
So we talked a lot about games. We talked a lot about gamification. What is the definitive statement that you would say to someone that this is why you need to bring in some sort of gamification or some sort of game or game show? Why would you say it's important to add an element like this?
Well, the name of this podcast is called No More Bad Events. I think there are so many events that just do the same thing year after year, year after year. COVID disrupted everything, and now people are more used to staying at home, maybe going virtual. They don't have to maybe go to these events anymore. So what's the incentive to get people there, in person, and maybe even when they're logging on to a virtual event, to turn their camera on, to be active in the chat? Is through engagement. We want to create moments where people are connecting, laughing, and beyond, and that also these moments go beyond the actual meeting. And now they are creating an experience and maybe a little bit of FOMO. I didn't get to go last year because I had this going on, but I'm going to make it next year. This is going to be a part of my calendar next year. I want to go. I saw who they're bringing in. They're bringing in Scott Bloom. I missed that. Or, oh, I love Scott. Great. Let's do this again. This is going to be so much fun. So we want to create that experience for people year after year. So we're creating a fun, new, and engaging experience where people will want to return.
Yeah, I think everyone has realized that you have to not only have some engagement, but have some fun, have ways for the audience to connect. Camaraderie is important, and games are just a great way to do it. It brings us back to our childhood. I always say, even in my keynote, when I'm talking about ways of connecting, I actually play a game in one of my keynotes, and I do that to show them, let's go back to when we were kids, when we just wanted to have fun. We weren't embarrassed to go up and talk to someone. We were a lot more free. And I think that's one of the major things that games do, is that it opens us up, gets us to be a little bit more free. So when the rest of the meeting, people are engaging at a better level, people are more open to take a little bit more chances. So there's a huge, I think, upside to games, a huge upside to gamification.
Yes, I agree with all that.
So if people want to get in touch with you, I guess they'll go to robferre.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, robferre.com. Find me on Instagram. I'm very active on there. LinkedIn as well. If you follow Scott already, I'll probably be commenting on his next post. We have a lot of fun on there on LinkedIn. I think we bring the fun to LinkedIn. I don't know. You, me, Johnny D, Jeff, Jason, we're all friends. And I think that's really fun is also, if you're in this world of entertainment, emceeing, the most important thing you can do is connect with people who are doing it and doing it better than you. And I've always admired what you've done. And it's been fun to be able to actually hang out with you. One day we'll do an event where I'll read your mind and it will be amazing.
Yes, and maybe we'll do an event where we'll co-host or co-MC an event. I'm looking forward to that as well. So Rob, thanks for taking the time. I know you're real busy. You got a couple of games this weekend. I'm looking forward to the next time we can get together and hang out. And thank you for dropping by when I was in Utah to say that quick 15-minute hello. That was great to meet you and your wife.
Yes. Yeah, you as well. Everybody, keep it up. Have fun. Play some games.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
That's it for now. Thanks once again to eSpeakers, the #1 way to find your next perfect speaker. With the deepest catalog of professionals available, you can be assured that the speaker you book will be the absolute best speaker based on your goals, bar none. I've been your host, Scott Bloom, corporate event MC and comedic keynote speaker. And of course, your connoisseur of connections. Oh, by the way, and if you're interested, you can book me for your next event on eSpeakers Marketplace at espeakers.com/marketplace. And if you like what you heard, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you loved what you heard, drop us a review, and don't forget to share with your friends. Thanks so much for listening. Now go out and make your event a great one.